She blinked once against the blinding twin suns overhead. Her pupils adjusted faster than the aliens expected. Reyes had trained in desert glares harsher than this. She didn't flinch as the thunderous roar of the crowd assaulted her ears. Amphitheater walls climbed high above. Metal and bone fused in a grotesque architecture of conquest. Alien warlords, nobles, and generals filled the seats, their teeth bared in laughter, their tongues wet with anticipation. Lieutenant Vale Reyes stood alone in the center of the arena. Barefoot, stripped of armor, no rifle, no blade, no comlink. Nothing but blood drying in the corner of her mouth and a heartbeat thudding steady as a metronome. Above her, a booming voice echoed, its translation chip barely able to keep up. Behold, the feared predator of Earth, a primitive ape in uniform. Today she will entertain us with her extinction. The crowd roared. She didn't move. She had seen worse crowds, drunker ones, more violent ones. Nothing topped the mob in Helmand Province after their warlord's cousin took a bullet through the ear. That day, she was pinned behind a rock for 7 hours. No rifle, no backup, no air support. This was just round 2. The arena gates hissed open. 6 Trask warriors emerged, each standing nearly 8 feet tall, scaled, plated, muscles bulging through their armor. They carried heavy bladed weapons, bastard children of axes and scimitars. The crowd cheered as the aliens raised their weapons high and pointed at her. Reyes didn't move. Not yet. Not until she'd counted their steps. 1, 2, 3. The Trask charged. She pivoted on bare feet, eyes scanning the arena floor. Rock, dust, blood, too much of it. A corpse in the corner, half-eaten, ribs exposed. Perfect. The first Trask reached, her bringing his cleaver down in a heavy arc. She sidestepped with predator grace, slammed her elbow into his throat, grabbed his arm as he stumbled and used his own momentum to twist and dislocate his shoulder. He shrieked. She didn't stop. With a heel strike to the back of his knee, she brought him down and stomped his face into the ground. Then she was moving, diving toward the corpse. The Trask's second warrior came in swinging. She rolled beneath the blade and came up with a broken rib in her hand, splintered, jagged, just long enough. She plunged it into his neck. Blood sprayed. Her face burned like acid. She'd smelled worse. 2 down. The others hesitated. She stood tall, blood slick, body heaving with breath, but her eyes were calm, calculating, cold. Above, in the royal box, the Trask warlord leaned forward. Why? Does she not run? Why does she not plead? She's human, one of the nobles said, voice uneasy. They had expected fear, begging, screams. Instead, they got silence and precision. The third Trask roared and charged. Reyes ran straight at him. He swung wide. She ducked under, grabbed a femur from the corpse and drove it upward into his groin. As he screamed, she climbed his body like a ladder, wrapped her legs around his neck and twisted. He went down hard. His head cracked the ground. She landed in a crouch, eyes up. 3 left. The fourth didn't hesitate. A smarter one. He came at her with a short sword, feinting high, then slashing low. She parried with the rib, until it snapped. Didn't matter. She closed the distance and headbutted him in the snout. Her skull rang, but his split open. He dropped to his knees. She jammed her thumb into his eye socket until it popped, then used his own blade to stab the 5th one clean through. The chest, the last Trask backed away. The crowd had gone quiet. What started as sport had become something else. They didn't know the name for it. They had no word for fear of the prey. Reyes didn't look at them. She only looked at the last warrior. She didn't charge him. She waited. He charged her. She sidestepped, pivoted, and snapped his leg with a kick to the side of the knee. He fell screaming. She sat on his chest, held his own clawed hand to his throat, and spoke her first words since entering the arena. You can scream or you can die. Fast! He screamed. She snapped his neck. It was over. The Trask warlord stood slowly in his booth. The crowd followed, stunned. Below, Reyes stood surrounded by corpses. She had no weapons, only broken bones. She reached down, picked up the jagged end of a snapped ulna and held it like a knife. Still breathing, she muttered to herself. Her voice echoed through the silent arena. Above, someone whispered, "We threw her in without weapons." "And she found them," said another. "She made them," said a third. Reyes turned and walked back toward the center of the ring. She stood tall, bloodied and silent, as the suns beat down. It wasn't a victory. It was a warning. Twin suns blistered down on a world built for cruelty. Lieutenant Vale Reyes stood barefoot in the dirt, stripped of her armor, her sniper gear long gone, along with the rest of her recon unit. The Trask Dominion hadn't even bothered with a trial. One moment she was observing their weapons facility from a crater rim on Moonside. The next, her world blinked into pain and static as a concussion net snapped around her and dropped her unconscious. Now she was here, center of a coliseum carved into a prison moon's jagged surface. The crowd above surged in tears, thousands of alien bodies writhing in anticipation, each seat filled with slavers, generals, and nobles. They weren't cheering her name. They were betting on her death. "Presenting," croaked a voice from above, amplified through ancient horns bolted into bone towers. "A relic species, bipedal, under-evolved, hostile, disobedient." The crowd booed. Several threw scraps into the arena, bones, trash, spit. "She represents Earth's elite military caste." "A predator, they say," the announcer sneered. "Let us see if this predator can even survive without her toys." Vale said nothing. Her breathing was controlled, her heartbeat steady. She rolled her shoulders once, feeling every micro-tear in her muscles. Her body had been beaten during captivity, but they hadn't broken her. That was their first mistake. Second mistake? Putting her in a place with gravity, atmosphere, and corpses. The Trask gates rumbled open. 6 warriors emerged, walking shoulder to shoulder. Each was 8 feet tall and armored in chitinous plates that flexed over muscle-bound limbs. They carried obsidian-forged melee weapons, cleavers, hooked blades, double-ended spears. They moved like predators, but their confidence reeked of theatrics. Reyes could tell immediately. They'd never fought someone like her. She didn't move. Not when the crowd screamed. Not when the warriors began circling. In her mind, she ran through sniper discipline. Rule 1. You don't shoot first. You learn the terrain. The arena was ringed with jagged shale. 2 corpses already lay in the dust. Recent kills. No gear on them, but bones. Bones were tools. Bones were sharp. She filed that away. Rule 2. Every movement has a purpose. Reyes shifted her stance half an inch, right foot slightly back, loose kneed. The crowd wouldn't notice. But the Trask did. A few hesitated. She locked eyes with the tallest one, their leader most likely. She gave him the faintest nod. He roared and charged. He expected her to flee, or scream. Instead, she pivoted and met him head-on. His weapon sliced the air where her head had been. She was inside his reach already, crouched low, grabbing his leg, and using her entire body to twist. His knee popped as she rolled. He howled, staggering. She didn't let up, drove her elbow into the back of his thigh, making him collapse. Another came up behind her with a bladed hook. She ducked. Sand tore at her face as the blade skimmed past. She rolled toward one of the corpses. His rib cage was mostly intact. She jammed her hand between the broken ribs, snapped one free with a grunt, and turned just in time to parry another swing. Bone. Met blade. Shattered. She grabbed a femur next. It was thick, sharp on one end. This one went through an alien's throat. Blood poured like black syrup down her forearm. She didn't wipe it off. The crowd had stopped jeering. She ducked another strike, used the spear shaft of one alien to lever herself upward, and came down heel first on his collarbone. It cracked under her bare foot. She landed, twisted the spear from his grip and rammed the butt into his throat. A 4th Trask tried to grapple her. She spun low and jammed the broken rib into his groin. He dropped, screaming. She took his wrist, twisted until the bone snapped and yanked one free. It was jagged, curved like a claw. Better, she muttered. She turned just in time to block another cleaver with her new improvised blade, redirected the swing into the ribs of the alien next to him. One down, another disabled, two more circling now, hesitant. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The Trask didn't plan for resistance, they planned for entertainment. Vale Reyes gave them neither. Instead, she stalked toward the two remaining, jaw clenched, blood streaming from her elbow down to her fingers. Her muscles burned from strain. Her body ached, but her mind was ice. A flash of her sniper course training surfaced. If you're down to your hands, use your teeth. If you're down to your teeth, use your rage. She didn't rage outwardly. She just kept moving. The fifth alien lashed out in desperation. She sidestepped, grabbed his wrist mid-swing, and yanked him forward, straight into her elbow. His nose shattered. As he stumbled, she twisted his jaw in both hands and yanked it free with a wet snap. The sixth tried to run. She tackled him. They tumbled through dirt and bone. She drove the severed jawbone into his throat. The last of the six gurgled, thrashed, and stilled. Vale Reyes stood slowly, blood steaming on her skin. One by one, she picked up the weapons scattered around her, examined them, weighed them, tossed them aside. She preferred her tools broken. Personal. From above, silence. The alien. Nobles and soldiers stared. The warlord leaned forward, brow furrowed. She has no weapons, he growled. She didn't need them, whispered another. Vale looked up at the box, her expression unreadable. She gripped the bloodied jawbone tighter. No rifle. No backup. No rules, she whispered, half to herself. Just me. She stepped forward as more gates creaked open in the distance, and smiled. The second wave came with less arrogance and twice the muscle. 10 Trask warriors marched through the iron gates in formation, shields raised, flanking with flared weapons meant for decapitation, dismemberment. Not a single one looked at the bodies lying in the sand. Reyes had already moved. She wasn't waiting in the open this time. She'd vanished into the uneven terrain behind the crumbling southern pillar, a collapsed structure of alien bonecrete and broken statuary. She moved, low, silent, barefoot. Blood streaked her skin in dried crusts, her fingers slick with grit and adrenaline. They advanced cautiously now. Good. Caution meant thought meant hesitation. And hesitation? That got you killed. One warrior peeled off from the group, scanning the shadows. Reyes watched his gait. Too slow, shield too high. She stepped behind him, swift as breath, jammed a rib shard into his exposed hamstring, then pivoted and buried a rock-tipped femur between his armor plates. He screamed, too loud. The others turned. Contact, one barked. That was new. Coordinated. Speech. But Reyes didn't engage. She vanished again. Adapt. Overcome. Break their bones. That was the mantra now. In the upper box, Warlord Crismac slammed a scaled fist into his thrown arm. She was supposed to die in the opening minute. His advisor cleared his throat nervously. This one adapts, Crismac snarled, rising to his feet. At the gate, a female Trask soldier named Siva stood rigid, gripping her trident tighter than regulation required. She'd watched humans in training vids before, always framed as savages, unpredictable and inefficient. Yet nothing about Reyes's movement was wild. Everything was calculated, measured, deliberate, and horrifying. Inside the arena, 2 warriors began sweeping near the west wall, spiked with ornamental jawbones welded centuries ago. Reyes timed her move. She slid through a dust drift and called out. They spun, charged. She darted sideways and kicked up sand. Dust cloud. Visibility 0. The first warrior stabbed wildly. His spear jammed through empty air. The second didn't stop. In time. His shield arm caught the first shoulder, knocking him off balance. Reyes moved like a whisper. She leapt past them, hooked the closest one's leg with a scavenged tibia and shoved. Both Trask crashed forward, into the wall. Bone spikes impaled armor and flesh alike. 2 down. The crowd gasped. Some leaned forward, breathless. Others recoiled, in silence. Reyes crouched again, pulling free a fractured clavicle from one body. She ran it against a nearby blade, shaving the edge to a point. Bone knife, silent, lightweight. In another life, she'd used a busted snowshoe frame to slice an enemy's throat during a whiteout in the Arctic. Flashback. Snow howled, white for miles. Reyes lay flat against the drift, wrapped in thermal mesh and ice-damp cloth. Her rifle was jammed, ice crystallized in the barrel. Adapt or die, her instructor had whispered through the comms. She used a rusted tent frame, sharpened it on stone, waited till the target passed her breathing hole, then slit his ankle, dragged him down into the snow and buried his scream under a foot of frozen tundra. End. Now, Reyes used the same tactic, timing, stealth, and misdirection. She moved with the shadows. She threw the rib shard into one warrior's throat, watching him drop mid-breath, clutching the bone like a wasp stinger. 3 others rushed her flank, forming a concave triangle. Classic trap. She stepped back. Purposefully. They closed in. Too late. They'd stepped into her setup. Earlier, she'd filled an old skull with sand and razor rocks, then wedged it under loose shale. A primitive pressure mine. The center warrior stepped on it. Snap. The skull cracked. Sand ejected violently, the rocks exploding outward. 2 caught shrapnel in the neck. 1 screamed and fell. Reyes was already sprinting, dropping low to sweep the legs of the survivor. She rolled with the motion, gripped his falling body and snapped his arm, then jammed the broken limb up through his jaw. Another down. Siva watched, jaw clenched. This wasn't a war, this was theater. But not for Reyes. This was discipline weaponized. Trask champion entered now, twice the size of the others, wearing a skull mask and dragging a massive maul across the ground. The crowd surged in anticipation. He grinned behind bone. Reyes exhaled slowly. They circled for seconds, both waiting. Then he charged. She didn't retreat. She stepped toward him. His maul came down, cratered sand, too slow. She pivoted, launched, a knee into his side, then wrapped an arm around his neck from behind. He threw her off, but not before she slipped something into the crack of his helmet. A rock fragment. He turned. She hurled the sharpened clavicle. It pierced the eye socket. He stumbled, gurgling. She was already moving. 1 step. 2. Then she grabbed his head and slammed it down on a rock. His skull cracked like pottery. She stood over him, breathing hard. Above. Silence again. She stared up at the noble seats. Her eyes locked with the warlords. "These aren't weapons," she called aloud, voice low but razor clear. "These are warnings." She raised the bloodied clavicle, let it drop. Another gate began to creak open. The arena stank of blood and burned ozone. Corpses cooled beneath shifting spotlights. Reyes crouched low among them, ribs rising and falling in a slow, meditative rhythm. Bruised, bloodied, 1 ear split. A gash above her brow wept into her. But her hands didn't shake. "Slow is smooth, smooth is fast," she whispered. "I am unseen, I am unheard. I am death from afar." Her breathing slowed with each line. She could almost smell the sand of Camp Blackrock. Hear Sergeant Halverson shouting cadence during sniper school. Back then, they taught her that the rifle was only an extension of the mind. Now she had no rifle, but her mind, still locked on target. A new gate clanged open. The crowd murmured. Something different this time. Not mockery, apprehension. The thing that emerged wasn't a soldier. It was a beast, 8 feet tall, covered in scaled carapace, quad arms and a bone-crowned head like a ramming hammer. Berserker class, drugged and rage-spiked. It roared, and the arena shook like a living thing. Krismak grinned in his viewing box. "Now let's see if she can break this." Reyes didn't move. She was buried beneath 3 corpses. Trask, fresh kills. She'd smeared blood across her bare arms and face. In the shadows, she looked like carrion. The beast lumbered forward, sniffed, snorted, passed within 10 feet. She remained perfectly still, one eye open just enough to track the angle of light. Sunlight caught the edge of a polished bone in her hand, taken from a warrior's shin, scraped and buffed to a mirrored sheen. She flicked it upward. Not at the beast, at the sun. The reflection bounced into the berserker's eyes. It shrieked, recoiling. Blind fury. It slammed into the wall, into stone. Roared. Reyes rolled from the pile, silent as fog, dragging a crude spear behind her, shaft. From a splintered Trask thigh bone, tip made from fused fang and metal buckle. She didn't charge. She waited for it to lower its head, then she slid under it. The beast pounced, too slow. Reyes jammed the spear upward into its throat just below. The jaw hinge, blood geysered down her arms. The berserker convulsed, then collapsed with a final heave. Silence. The crowd no longer cheered. They watched, breath held, eyes wide. Not at a performance, but at something impossible. Vale Reyes stood, dripping with blood not her own, backlit by broken daylight. A warrior, a phantom, a problem. In the shadows of the gate, Siva flinched, not from horror, from recognition. This wasn't a creature. This wasn't some feral species from a backwater death world. This was discipline incarnate, every move calculated. Every action deliberate. Reyes turned slowly, making sure they all saw her. Let them wonder what she'd do next. Let them fear it. Another alien writhed nearby, not yet dead. Reyes walked toward him, deliberate steps. She knelt beside him and didn't kill him. She leaned in and let him scream. Loud, echoing. The sound of failure and pain. She stood and walked on, each step placed like a sniper breath between trigger pulls. In the Emperor's box, Crismac's grin had soured. His throne guard flanked him, one nervous, the other unreadable behind gold-etched armor. Reyes stared directly up at them. She didn't look away. Not this time. No longer prey. Now the predator. The arena dimmed as clouds passed above. Only the ring lights lit her figure, a silhouette painted in viscera framed by bone. She moved with ghost-like precision across the floor, toward the corpse of a downed shock trooper. His weapon had shattered, but the energy core glowed dimly, thrumming. Reyes knelt, eyes scanning, fingers probing. She pried the core loose, careful not to puncture it. Then from scraps of armor and splintered rib, she began to assemble something rudimentary but precise. A rail dart, bone spine, wrapped in copper scrap. Energy core, conductive plate. It wouldn't fire far, but it didn't have to. Only once. Flashback. She was 13 the first time she fired an actual rifle, her grandfather's antique .308 from a frozen perch in Utah. No optics, no bipod, just a heartbeat and breath. Remember, Vale? You don't need to see the breath, you just have to feel it. She aligned the bone spike, balanced the weight, rigged the pressure plate with a sliver of steel. Then she stood, slowly, her eyes locked onto the Emperor's balcony again. The gold-armored guard shifted forward, 2 meters left of Crismac. Reyes stepped into the light. No speech, no fanfare, just one breath in. And then she slammed the spike into the core. Crack. The bone dart screamed upward with electromagnetic force. Primitive, unstable, perfect. It punched straight through the guards. Armor. Chest to back. He dropped, dead before he hit the floor. The other guard went rigid. Crismac recoiled. Siva took one involuntary step forward, mouth open. Below, Reyes lowered her hand. Still a sniper, she muttered. The crowd? Silent. Not in awe, in fear. And for the first time in the control room behind the arena, a commander whispered to a subordinate, "Shut it down." Too late. The rail dart kill shattered the illusion. The Emperor's golden guard crumpled like discarded armor, and the silence afterward was heavier than the stone beneath Reyes's feet. A split second later, chaos. The crowd screamed. Spotlights scrambled. Sirens blared. Trask officers in high balconies barked commands into comms, trying to reassert order. Reyes didn't wait. She was already moving, ducking low as bolts of plasma fire tore into the sand where she had stood. The announcer's voice, cut in, panicked. Directive change. Execute the human immediately. All units, lethal force authorized. Send in the full arena guard. 10 armored warriors stormed through the side gates. Elite, coordinated. Reyes didn't blink. She picked up 2 sharpened femurs from the ground, still warm with blood, and dropped into a low stance, feet wide, eyes locked. Then she moved. She wasn't graceful. She was brutal. Bones struck metal with wet cracks. She drove one blade into a warrior's thigh, pivoted on her heel, and broke another's collarbone with a shoulder slam. Her movements were surgical chaos, every strike ending in a break, a kill, a red splash across the walls. But she wasn't invincible. A blade grazed her ribs. Another warrior caught her arm. She twisted, dislocated her own shoulder to slip free, and stabbed the bone through his throat. Pain flared. Her vision darkened at the edges. Still, she rose. From the shadows, Siva emerged, no longer in armor, no longer hiding. She stormed into the fray with a spear wrenched from a fallen guard and drove it into a Trask lieutenant's back. The warrior screamed, betrayed and dying. The other guards hesitated. One even lowered his weapon. Siva. Reyes spat blood, eyes narrowing. You sure about this? You bleed for honor, Siva growled. They bleed for sport. We're not the same. Together they tore through the remaining warriors. Reyes fought like a demon. Siva, like a storm. One bone weapon snapped in Reyes's hand. She didn't stop. She jabbed the broken tip into an alien's eye, then stole his blade. The arena floor was a massacre. Smoke curled into the open sky. The 2 women climbed toward the Emperor's balcony, steps slick with blood. Shouts echoed from high walls, officers fleeing, attendants scattering. Cosmic stood alone. He had stopped laughing. Monster, he spat. Correct, Reyes said. But I'm your monster now. Siva lunged and struck down the final 2 guards, at the gate. Reyes stepped over them, cracked Cosmic across the jaw with her fist and yanked the communicator from his throne. She held it up. This is Lieutenant Vale Reyes of Earth Naval Special Warfare, she said, voice low, measured. You wanted a show? Broadcast this. Siva stepped beside a comms panel. Her fingers danced across the alien interface, shutting down the feeds, rerouting the signal. The main broadcast channel opened. Across Trask space, across dozens of colonies and systems, the arena feed flickered. The commentators' voices cut out. Instead, the image resolved. One human, standing in blood, bones in hand, scars across her face, a storm behind her eyes. This is what you built, Reyes said calmly. You wanted to humiliate Earth, break a human, prove our weakness. Instead, you made this. She gestured behind her, bodies, fire, silence. You made this, she said again. And now your people are watching. On distant colony worlds, Trask citizens looked away from their screens. Others leaned closer, disturbed and mesmerized. Some guards refused new arena orders. Protests broke out in Trask capital zones, some out of horror, some in wild, fearful reverence. We don't die easy, Reyes finished. Next time, try sending more than a cage in a crowd. She ended the feed. Siva stared at her. You could have escaped. Reyes looked at the stars above the arena. I needed them to see first. They turned. No more guards came. The arena lay still, silent ruins of blood and sand. Together they walked through the smoke-choked corridors of the Colosseum. No one stopped them. No one dared. Behind them, flames licked the edge of the Emperor's drapes. The final image transmitted to the Trask network before the feed cut entirely. 2 figures, bloodied, walking side by side out of hell. One Trask noble, watching from a moon colony, murmured in disbelief. Humans are monsters. A younger voice behind him whispered, No, she is a mirror, and we don't like what we see. Outside on the windswept landing platform, Reyes looked at the stars again. Next time, she said, glancing at Siva, bring a sniper rifle. She paused, smirked. Or better yet, don't. Let me know if you want a title card image prompt, an epilogue, or a novel-style expansion.